We've talked your ear off about glycolysis and all the NADH we made as we break down glucose into smaller and smaller bits. And you've also seen that NADH is being traded for ATP in the electron transport chain. Well, if you were paying attention, you noticed that glycolysis takes place in the cytosol, but the ETC is in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So somehow NADH has to get inside the mitochondria, right? Wrong. But the electrons from NADH do in fact have to get in there, and they do so by riding a shuttle. A malate-aspartate or glycerol phosphate shuttle, to be precise. Welcome back to Sketchy Land. Though actually, by this point you've probably been here for a while, and you're looking to explore some new areas of the park. Well, they may not be the sexiest rides around, but our shuttles are clean, comfortable, and convenient. They'll take you exactly where you need to go and back again. The malate-aspartate and glycerol 3-phosphate shuttles transport NADH electrons from glycolysis, which occurs in the cytosol, into the mitochondria where they're used in the ETC. We've used our recurring ride symbols to represent glycolysis and the ETC. If you haven't tried out those rides yet, I suggest you check them out now. This'll make way more sense if you do. Also notice that big park fence. That's the inner mitochondrial membrane, with the cytosol to the left and the matrix to the right. Let's start with the malate-aspartate shuttle, which transports NADH electrons into the mitochondria as malate. In the cytosol, malate dehydrogenase, or MDH, uses NADH produced by glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase during glycolysis to turn oxaloacetate into malate. And for bonus points, we also just recycled an NAD+ that can be used again in glycolysis. Malate crosses the inner mitochondrial membrane via malate transporter protein, just like this tram is passing through a gap in the fence. Once inside the mitochondria, MDH reverses the first reaction and turns malate and NAD+ back into oxaloacetate and NADH. There, that's it. The magic just happened. Did you catch it? We started with an NADH outside the mitochondria, and now we've got one inside, but we never moved an actual NADH across the membrane. We just brought its electrons across using malate. Pretty cool, huh? Just me? Well, what can I say? I'm Ricky and I'm a huge nerd. Okay, that was cool, but a one-way shuttle is no fun, so let's finish out the cycle. Because oxaloacetate can't exit the mitochondria, it gets converted to aspartate via aspartate transaminase, or AST. Aspartate then exits the mitochondria, AST in the cytosol turns it back into oxaloacetate, and the cycle repeats. Oaxacan hot chocolate. Sweet and a little spicy, just like my cat. Well, that's one shuttle down, but as my old man always says, 2 shuttles are better than 1. He's a pretty weird guy, actually, come to think of it. But in this case, he was right. We have a second shuttle that helps transport electrons from NADH into the mitochondria for use in the ETC, and that's the glycerol phosphate shuttle. We'll start once again in the cytosol with NADH from glycolysis. Glycerol 3-phosphate dehydrogenase uses that NADH to turn DHAP, an intermediate of glycolysis, to glycerol 3-phosphate. Once again, in this step, we also regenerate NAD+ for use in glycolysis. Glycerol 3-phosphate travels to the inner mitochondrial membrane where membrane-bound glycerol 3-phosphate dehydrogenase turns it back into DHAP. But this time, instead of regenerating NADH, we make FADH2. That's important because if you remember back to the ETC ride, FADH2 is worth fewer ATPs than NADH. So this shuttle is actually less efficient than the malate-aspartate shuttle. So maybe 2 shuttles aren't better than 1 and my dad was wrong after all? Well, while I ruminate on that, those FADH2 electrons enter the ETC via CoQ and then continue on their merry way. Meanwhile, the membrane-bound dehydrogenase also recycled DHAP, so we're ready to start the cycle over again. Welp, that's it. Let's shuttle on out of here. The malate-aspartate shuttle transports electrons from NADH produced in glycolysis, in the cytosol, into the mitochondria to be used in the ETC. First, malate dehydrogenase uses NADH to convert oxaloacetate to malate in the cytosol. Malate moves into the mitochondria where malate dehydrogenase converts it back to oxaloacetate. In this process, NADH is regenerated and ready to use in the ETC. AST converts oxaloacetate to aspartate, which travels back to the cytosol. AST then converts it back to oxaloacetate, and the cycle repeats. The glycerol phosphate shuttle also serves to transport NADH electrons to the ETC. Glycerol 3-phosphate dehydrogenase uses NADH to convert DHAP to glycerol 3-phosphate. Membrane-bound glycerol 3-phosphate dehydrogenase on the inner mitochondrial membrane then converts glycerol 3-phosphate back to DHAP, generating FADH2 in the process. Electrons from FADH2 travel to the ETC via CoQ.